Hey everyone, it's Sarah, and I am back to film another month in my reading journal. Again, I know these videos are going up a little bit late, but the summer is really crazy because we're in the middle of moving and kind of being in multiple places at once. So I do apologize that this is not going up, in a very timely fashion. It's almost the end of August, and this is my July spread, but I do like filming these videos and I do enjoy putting them up, so hopefully better late than never. So to start off, we are going into my overview. I read a lot this month, and it's actually my second highest reading month so far this year. I do expect August to be a lot less, and probably September as well, just because all of our moving is happening in September. So July just kind of had a sweet spot for reading. But this is where I roughly track when I was reading, how things overlap. It's a little bit more visual. And then for something a little bit neater, we have my monthly spread over here. So same idea, but just a little bit neater in the monthly layout. I did add in some washi. This is probably from Michael's, and then this is from Simply Gilded, and then the boxes were from a Happy Planner book. And then just looking at my overview, I read 13 books this month, and part of the reason why is in the month of June or this summer, my library was doing a program where if you traveled to different libraries in the district, I think there were like 54 of them total that you could have gone to, then you got stamps, and then you could get entered in after you got 10 stamps for a prize for every 10 stamps you got. And so I was able to visit 20 different libraries in my district. And because of that, I had a number of libraries that I, you know, went, perused, and then got books from. And then I had too many books, and then I was trying to renew them. And then I got to the point where I couldn't renew some of them. And so I had to quickly read a number of them before they had to be turned back into the library. So that's kind of what happened at the end of the month. These three in particular, I had, deadlines for reading. And with the Finley Donovan books, it was, they're books 2 and 3 in a series. I could renew book 2, but I couldn't renew book 3. And then the waiting list for book 3 seemed like it would take a little bit of time. So I didn't really want to turn it back in and then try to get it again. So I just read, 3 books in 4 days or something like that. So, anyways, 4,378 pages. And then my favorite book this month was Something Wild and Wonderful, which we will get into more in just a bit. Also, with this, I had a lot of struggles with my printer this morning. So, some of these are stickers, some of them are not. This one has a little bit off coloring because I had problems with my ink and I ran out of sticker paper. So, it all came together. But I will say, having sticker paper makes it a lot easier than just doing regular paper and gluing it down. But it all, kind of goes together once it's all down. But I do need I do need to purchase more sticker paper. And then just kind of my reading goals for the month, and then my July bingo from the Shelfie Chronicles. I only got one bingo this month. I had a lot of books that were on my TBR that didn't really fit a prompt, and that's how it'll be the next couple of months. I did read almost every day, -3, and then I had my list for the goals of what to read, and I did everything except for 2 that I had the goal of reading, and then I had read a couple extras. But these were all ones that I had on my TBR for the month of July, and like I said, I did very well on it. And yeah, so that was everything for my first part of my planner. And then the second part of my reading journal, I have my Goodreads tracker. And then, granted, since we are well into August, I do have a couple of extra August books popped in there as well, but I'm almost done with this page. I did buy more of these trackers from the Shelfie Chronicles just so that I could continue on, but we are just moving and grooving. I think I'm nearly to my reading goal for the year. My goal was 75 books, which I thought was a decent goal, and then I've just read a lot more this year than I had anticipated. So we'll see where I end up, but I definitely will be meeting my reading goal this year, which is exciting. And then just my monthly overview again with the 13 books. And March was my highest month with 14. So pretty exciting. Then getting into the individual books. Okay, first off, we had Crying in H Mart. This one was an audiobook I read with my husband, so it took us a little while to read it just because we usually started on a road trip and then we don't always finish it until either another road trip or when it comes due and we have to quick finish it. So, this was a memoir written by a Korean American woman named Michelle, and it talked about growing up with her Korean American culture. She had a Korean mom and then a dad that was American. And but a lot of the book centers around her mother dying and just the experience of being kind of a caretaker for her mother and rediscovering her culture and things like that. It wasn't my favorite book. I gave it 4 stars, and that was maybe a little generous. I think it was probably like a 3.5 rounded up for me. It was fine. I just, it wasn't my favorite. And especially because it has such good reviews, I thought I would like it more. And it was okay for me. And I think it was well written. Yeah, there's something about it that it just wasn't quite as engaging as I thought it would be. And I found myself kind of, like I said, hustling to get it finished before the due date versus finishing it a lot earlier. Then we have Back in the Burbs. This one I gave 3 stars to. Again, wasn't my favorite book. This one was about a girl named Mallory, or a woman named Mallory. She's in her 30s. She's getting a divorce from her husband. She doesn't have a job. She's kind of down on her luck. And her great aunt dies, or her aunt dies, and leaves her a house in the suburbs. And the aunt had been in like a nursing facility or a nursing home before her death, and so the house is in disrepair, and she decides instead of selling the house like everyone wants her to, she's going to fix it up, move to the suburbs, and kind of restart her life. There's a lot of unbelievable qualities about this book. It talks about how the great aunt was only in the nursing home for a year, so I don't really know how the house got into such bad disrepair as they talk about. They also, her aunt was like a hoarder, so they have to go through a bunch of things. And Mallory doesn't have a job, so the fact that she's even considering, um, inheriting the house versus just taking the money, because they talk about like how much she has to pay in taxes for it and how much the repairs are going to be. It was just a very unbelievable book, that's supposed to be kind of a realistic book, so to speak. It's in modern times, it's not a fantasy novel. And so I think I had a hard time wrapping my head around some of those bits that I just, who would actually do that? It's part of a series. I don't think I'm going to keep reading the series. Um, yeah, I think they have other books, but I think I'm probably just going to call it good with the one. Then we have The Last Word. This was my book of the month for whatever month that was. April, maybe? June, July. This was June, so this must have been May, maybe? So this was my book of the month, and it was a thriller. I gave it 4 stars. And basically, you have Emma, who is house sitting on a remote beach in the off season, and she's definitely trying to get away from her life or something. She's definitely kind of hiding out, but in her free time, since she has a lot of it, she's just out on this beach. She ends up reading a lot of books, and she reads a book that someone had recommended to her and doesn't love it. Gives it a 1 star review on Amazon. It only had a couple of reviews to begin with. It wasn't a very well, established novel, or didn't have thousands of reviews. So her negative review really affects the ratings of the book, and the author reaches out and asks her to remove her bad review because that really hurts as a small author. And she says no. So they kind of get in a little argument online, and the author's like, you're gonna regret this. And, jump forward, then, the author is basically trying to kill her on this remote beach house, kind of a locked door, kind of a mystery thing. And so I don't know, I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of, I think, good suspense, or just it was interesting. I kept wanting to read more. I will say I didn't love, she had a dog with her, and so there were a couple of like dog violence um, bits that I wasn't a fan of. That especially the dog had a very similar name to my dog, so that also didn't help things with how I viewed some of those parts. But I enjoyed it, so worth a read in my opinion, if you like thrillers. Next, we have Heat Wave. Gave this one 2 stars. I really did not enjoy it that much. I was really hopeful for it. So this is basically, if you've ever watched the TV show Castle, it's about a writer that like shadows at the NYPD, and for a book he's writing to get some, background on it. And this is basically supposed to be the book that he writes in the show. And there's multiple books in the series, but this is the first one. And I just didn't like the way it read. It read more like a TV show manuscript than a book, in my opinion. I think it would have been fine if it was just on TV, and I'm sure it was probably an episode at some point, or something similar was probably an episode of TV at some point. But it just wasn't as gripping. I did not like the narrator. I will say that. I really was hoping for like a Nathan Fillion type voice, and the narrator just did not deliver it like that. There was also a part where I think they had like a Swedish nanny that they were interviewing, and his interpretation of a Swedish accent was like the worst accent I've ever heard. So I just didn't enjoy this as a book or an audiobook. I think either way I wouldn't have loved it. Um, the basic plot is that they're obviously investigating a murder, and it's this kind of real estate magnate that falls off of his penthouse roof, and then they're trying to figure out obviously who killed him. And basically the characters are an author that follows a detective, so it exactly mirrors the show. But like I said, this is better probably as an episode of TV than a book, and I won't read more in the series. But I did need it because one of my challenges for my buzzword challenge of this month, I needed a weather related word, so that's why I had to finish it off. And plus, I'm not a big, did not finish kind of a person. I try to read every book start to finish, even if I don't love it. Next up, we have a book that I really did like. This was Ink Blood Sister Scribe, and this one was a fantasy novel. You have two sisters, Joanna and Esther, and they've been like estranged or haven't seen each other in a while. And because Esther moved out when she was 18, and she jumps around every year, she moves to a new place. And Joanna and her father are these like librarians for magical books. So they have a magical book collection that they have to keep secret. They have to have these magical wards that guard their house so that no one can get into it or find where these magical books are located. And they're basically protectors for these books. But her dad dies, and so then she's alone. And basically, Esther has been moving from place to place every year since she was 18 because her dad said that she needed to keep moving on the run. She couldn't stay anywhere for longer than a year at a time. And she ends up staying in the place that she is currently in for longer than a year. So then all of a sudden it kind of sets these things into motion. And um, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but if you like books, if you like a little bit of magical fantasy elements tied in, I really enjoyed this. And I kind of got it off of the cover. The cover was just beautiful. Again, this was a book of the month pick. And I just really liked it. So I don't want to say too much, but it's definitely worth a read. Next up, we have Where the Grass is Green and the Girls Are Pretty. This one I give 3 stars to. I listened to the audiobook on this one. And I didn't realize till later when I was reading reviews this is the same author as The Devil Wears Prada. I believe someone had said. But I don't know, this one just kind of fell a little bit flat for me. Um, Basically, you have Peyton, who is a news anchor at, some sort of a big news station, CNN type news station or Today Show. And she is, really well off. She has this perfect life. Well, then her husband gets arrested for a cheating, like college admissions scandal that he paid someone off to get his daughter into college. And so you follow Peyton and her daughter Max as they go to the suburbs to live near Sky, Peyton's sister, while they kind of get away from the city for the summer to hopefully things die down and figure out, what Max is going to do for college and how everything is going to work out. Um, and I just thought it was a little bit too ripped from the headlines. Like it was very, um, yeah, it was very Lori Loughlin kind of um, getting her daughter into college, kind of that sensationalism story. This celebrity, how could they be involved with it? So I don't know. It was fine. It wasn't like a bad book necessarily, but I just didn't love it. I didn't love the characters. You also have Sky, Peyton's sister, who is they live in paradise, obviously a reference to the song lyric and a reference to the song. Um, and it's this like very idyllic suburban town, and she is trying to build a school for the underprivileged, or like a house for the underprivileged to basically move into their school district to attend the really nice school for a year, or whatnot. And I don't know, I found that really unbelievable because, it only fit like 8 people and they needed two, um, house moms or staff to kind of watch the girls and things like that. And her project really is not taking off well. And she's developed this spending habit because she's just trying to buy things for this house. And I don't know, I thought that plot line was just a little bit weird and just didn't love it. And like I said, it was a little bit unbelievable in my mind. Um, but like I said, it wasn't necessarily a bad book. It just didn't hit in the right place for me. So, anyways, now we have A House at the Bottom of the Lake. I gave this one 3 stars, but I read this one in a day. It was a very short read, 188 pages, but yeah, definitely I read it in 5 hours or something like that. So not a very long book or a hard book to go through. At first, I really didn't like the writing of this book just because it seemed so simplistic. I mean, it was simplistic. It didn't seem it was, but I really I don't know. They write it as horror, and basically you have Amelia and James, and they go out on a date for the first time. It's summer love. They're 17, I believe, and they go kayaking on this lake, and then they kayak over to like another lake that's connected, that's a little bit quieter. Then they kayak over to a third lake, and then at that third lake, they have to go through this weird tunnel, and then when they emerge, it's just this like middle of nowhere kind of forgotten lake. And they're paddling around, and then they realize there's a house at the bottom of the lake, hence the title. and they decide that they want to explore the house. So they start, swimming down into it. Then they get diving equipment to dive down into it. And they're exploring this house, and it's kind of weird. And there's, some weird things going on. Um, and yeah, like I said, don't want to give too much away, but because it wasn't a very long book to begin with. But basically, the premise is, um, yeah, they're exploring a house underneath the lake, falling in love because it's, the summer, first love, romance kind of novel. I didn't love the ending, I'll say that. I feel like the ending was a little confusing, and that just kind of left me wanting a little bit more. So it was a good book, but I gave it 3 stars because, like I said, there was something missing from it for me, and the writing style was very simple, and I thought it just could have been a little bit better. Next, we have Boss Witch. I gave this one 2 stars. I'm kind of on a mean streak. I usually rate things very highly, but I'm trying to be a little bit better about not just giving everything 5 stars just because I think it's good. So this one I gave 2 stars. I read the first book earlier in the year. I can't remember what that one was called. It was, Witch Please. So this one was like a really cute romance about a baker and a witch who repairs appliances falling in love. And so this is the same realm, same storyline, but it's her cousin who also helps her with the shop, that also, has these magical witch powers. And but there's a witch hunter that is trying to find them, that's on their that's in their town searching for them. And she basically, Clem, decides that she's going to distract the witch hunter by like making him fall in love with her. And so she, tracks him down at the bar the one night and flirts with him, and, starts going out with him and dating this guy to try to, keep him off the trail. And the problem I had with it, there was a lot of repeated timeline. Like this book starts probably, a third of the way before that book ends, the first book ends. So there was a lot of like overlapping timeline that it didn't quite seem like it connected the same way that I remember it being in the first book. And then also too, her point of view and I don't know, like interpretations of everyone else in the book, she's kind of mean to the other characters in the book, and paints a picture, you really fell in love with the 2 characters in the first book, and then she's kind of like, I don't know, turns it on its head, makes you not like them as much, or makes them seem like they weren't good people as much. And I didn't love that because I did like the first book. It was very cutesy. This one was just a little bit more just unhappy. And I get it. There's a witch hunter coming after you. Yeah, maybe it's not going to be like the happiest of books necessarily, but for it being marketed as like a romance, it wasn't lighthearted in my opinion. I don't know. And like I said, it just, yeah, it just didn't seem to fit in with the same universe as the first one, even though it was. And there's more books in the series as well. And I think I'm going to stop with this one. I think the first one I really liked, you know, but this one just really fell flat. And then it kind of got into some weird stuff at the end. And yeah, I just thought it just didn't hit right for me. I feel like I keep saying that, but a lot of these books just, yeah, weren't my favorite this month. So moving into another one that was kind of a dud for me before we get into some better ones, Vacation Wars. This one I got on Kindle Unlimited. I've read another book by the same author, Megan Quinn, that I liked earlier in the year. This one was marketed as a romance, and it's about Tessa, whose family went to this Greek resort every year growing up, every summer, and she always had a crush on one of the guys at the resort, or this kid that was always at the resort too. His name was Miles. He was Greek. And but she was very awkward and could never get up the nerve to talk to him. And then eventually one summer they do, and then something awkward happens, and then they don't talk to each other for 7 years or see each other for 7 years. Well, now they're back at the resort because Miles' dad owns the resort and he's trying to, or he's working for his dad. And then Tessa's sister is getting married. And so they're back at the resort for a vacation slash bachelorette party before the wedding. And then you have, because they're 30, apparently they made a pact in high school, this group of girls, that if you turned 30 and you weren't married or have in a very serious relationship, that basically the other people in the group would find someone for you to marry and you just had to do it. And so that part got really weird for me. The fact that you are um 30 and you're following a pact that you made in high school that was obviously a very childish pact. Um, and the vacation wars part, I think the title's misleading. The war part is that it's like the sister against sister, because Tessa, the sister they're trying to set up, is very resistant to the whole thing, and they're trying to set her up with like total losers and things like that. And so it doesn't seem like her sister really likes her that much. And and like I said, and they're very forceful, and there's a lot of like antics that are just, again, very unbelievable and just very over the top, and I just couldn't believe it, and I just didn't enjoy that part of it. Also, too, in the beginning of the book, they call Miles the Bulge because at one point he had a very prominent display in his swimsuit as like growing up in their teenage years or something like that. And I just didn't like that either. Like, I don't know. I just thought that was a little bit too, I don't know what the right word is. I didn't like that, I don't know. I didn't like that nickname. And so I had a hard time too with that. I had a hard time getting into it. It took me, 3 weeks to read this book, and because it started it, didn't really like it, and then I was trying to finish it. So again, 2 stars on that one. I just thought it was not as fun of a romance. I just thought it was a little catty and mean. Getting on to a really, really nice romance. This was my top book of the month. This one was so beautiful. So I have my book club that I do with my best friend where we do our book of the month books. And then my sister-in-law, on and off, she has a book club running, and it kind of is a little bit puttering out. But the last book that we had to read was Something Wild and Wonderful in, like, I don't know, February. And I forgot to buy the book. Then they were doing the discussion of it. And so I just decided, instead of buying the book, I'll wait for it to come available at my library. It finally came available at my library. And so, now is my opportunity to read it, 4, 6 months after everyone else did. And it was such a nice romance. So you have Alexi and Ben, and they are both hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. Ben recently graduated from nursing school, so he's kind of having his last hoorah before he, goes into the working world. And he's very outgoing and kind, and kind of the more outgoing personality. Then you have Alexi, who's definitely more reserved. He's hiking the trail because he's got a lot of things going on in his personal life that he's trying to think out and figure out. And he's there to be alone and, just kind of hike this trail and figure out his life, essentially. And they end up crossing paths and end up hiking together. And then they, slowly start to fall in love, and it was just such a sweet romance. And then every time I read a book about the Pacific Crest Trail, without fail, like, Wild, I know I've read other books too, but Wild is the only one I can think of at the moment. I always think like, oh yeah, I could totally go out and hike. It'd be way harder than any of the books let on, but it does kind of make you want to get outdoors and go hike. So definitely a good one to read if you were camping or on an outdoor adventure. But it was just a really sweet romance. It's also, I think, the first time I've read a male romance. So that was just nice to see some different representation. And like I said, I gave it 5 stars. I read it, I finished it, and I was sad. I texted my husband and I was like, I just wish the book was longer. Like I want to keep reading it. So I think this author has one other book that she's written so far. So I have that on my TBR to read at some time because I really enjoyed this one. Then the next one I have is Hidden Valley Road. That was another 5-star read. This one was an audiobook that I did, and it's about the Gavin family who, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, etc., as they're having all these kids, they are they have 12 kids in total. And as the kids get older and get into their, late teens, early 20s, a lot of them start to exhibit mental health disorders. And, it starts off with the one son, but then slowly a lot of the other sons have mental health issues as well. And eventually they have 6 out of their 12 children that are diagnosed with schizophrenia. And it's very interesting. And they talk a lot about like the history of schizophrenia. They talk about improvements or how like the scientific community learned about schizophrenia and how they researched it. They have a couple of different researchers that they talk about, or doctors they talk about. And it was just really fascinating. I learned a lot about schizophrenia. And then specifically this family, you go through, I mean, basically from like the 60s, maybe even before then, because you start off with like Mimi as a child and things like that, the mother, and all the way to present day, and how they contributed to scientific research, because this was such a unique thing to have that many people in a family that all had the disease. And so they used a lot of the early research was about familial links. And so it was just really interesting. I gave it 5 stars. It was also one of those books where, you learn a lot about, um, yeah, just different people and different ways of life. They have like the parents were falcon trainers at some point, or that was like their hobby was they would, catch and train falcons. So I don't know, just a lot of like interesting little side stories too. But ultimately, it's about a family. They're dealing with mental health, schizophrenia, and how they helped contribute to what we know about schizophrenia now, because they had like 40 years that they've been studied, or at least those that are still living have been studied for the disease. So very interesting, especially if you want to learn something. It was on Oprah's book club. I think it's a pretty well reviewed novel in general. So then the last 2 books I have are both from the Finlay Donovan series. I read the first Finlay Donovan book in February. And like I said, I had checked them both out from the library because I had been, hopping around to a bunch of different libraries. And I think I just got lucky because it was a really tiny library that I found these at. And so I just checked them both out, and then I couldn't renew them because there were too many people on the hold list for the third book, which I think just came out in the last year. So basically she's a pseudo hit woman. In the first book, she's an author that's mistaken as a hit woman by someone at Panera, and so then they hire her for a job, and things, misadventures ensue. So now book 2, she finds out that someone else has taken out a hit on her husband, and so she is basically, well, her ex-husband, and she's basically trying to stop the hit from taking place, but of course ends up getting entangled in it as well. And she, like I said, things ensue. A lot of funny antics. So I gave it 4 stars. It's definitely just kind of a fun, lighthearted, easy book to get through. Nothing too serious there. Then in book 3, now she's gotten kind of tangled up in the mob, and the mob is blackmailing her, and they want her to kill this dirty cop that is causing issues for them. And so she goes undercover at a police academy to try to figure out who the dirty cop is and figure out what to do. So those were all of the books that I read this month. Like I said, top books I read: Something Wild and Wonderful, Hidden Valley Road, and then Ink Blood, Sister Scribe. Those would be the top three I would recommend if you were looking to read one of them. And then I've already started doing my books for August, so we'll have to look at those later. I'm just slowly filling up my my book challenges for the year. I'm getting to the point now where I'm starting to just find a prompt and seek out a book, because I've gotten to the point where the books that I am currently reading are not necessarily gonna fall into a specific category. So, like Set in Australia, I think I have a book that I just checked out to go with that. Published by Macmillan. I've had some that I've had published by Macmillan, but just that they fit other prompts that I wanted to knock off better, or first. Book by Octavia E. Butler. I have that one checked out to read next. So yeah, still just moving and grooving on them. But I think I don't anticipate finishing all of these challenges by the end of the year, especially like the Read the States. I think that one is going to be one that I won't finish, because there's a lot of states, and there's a lot of states books that take place in the exact same state. But it is fun, like I said, to just kind of, after I read a book and I fill out my first page, or my description page on it, then I go through and I see if it fits any of these prompts. But anyways, that is everything I have so far for my reading journal. Like I said, the reading journal from August is going to be delayed just because September is a really busy month, so I'm not sure when I'll be able to film my August reading journal. And then hopefully in October things will kind of start to get back to normal, but August, September are probably going to be delayed. But excited to eventually be in our new home, and even though it's kind of a long process. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me blabber on about books, and I will see you in my next video. Bye now.